Hello, and welcome to the first of 3 videos in which I will be making some projects for my local library, the Brandon Free Public Library. It's going through a once-in-a-century renovation. We're redoing all sorts of fun stuff. I happen to be a board member of the library, so I've been very active in that particular process. And they asked me if I would build a few pieces of furniture for them, and I was very honored by that. So what you see me working on here are a set of DVD shelves. Our library still has several hundred DVDs that get routinely lent out to various members of the community, and we need a place to put them because the old shelves are not quite cutting the mustard anymore. So, in order to match all the rest of the materials in the library, we're using this wonderful clear hard maple that the local high school woodshop class milled up. It's fantastic, it looks great. Really nice stuff. Fortunately, it came to me pretty much already planed, thanks to my friend Bruce. And my friend Bob Reed owns a mill workshop not far from me, and he was kind enough to do most of the initial planing on all of this hard maple, which was a huge help, because running this all through my little planer would have been a death sentence. Here you see me clamping up some of the smaller pieces of maple I had. We needed to get about 6.5 inches width for the shelves here, and so in order to make the most of the wood I had, I decided to clamp up some of these using these Rockler panel clamps that I got for a different project. Worked out pretty well. I had to put on some extra clamping pressure. I think on a smaller panel these clamps would have done just fine, but since I was gluing up pretty much their maximum capacity, made sure to give them a little extra helping hand with some extra clamps I had. And then I ran those glue ups through the drum sander a couple times, and they cleaned up really nicely. Now I had to start figuring out how I was going to route the dados that the shelves would sit in on the vertical pieces. These are pretty straightforward, there's no backs or anything on them, but it did mean that the dados had to be pretty precise, because I didn't have a lot of wiggle room for error. So what I started doing was using my old sliding dovetail jig to sort of adjust where I was putting the dados, and I used a series of spacers in order to get the spacing right between them. It worked, but it wasn't the most elegant solution. I was fiddling with a bunch of clamps, bunch of pieces of wood. The potential for error was relatively high if I wasn't really paying attention. And so you'll see in a minute here I developed a new jig that did the job much better. Yeah, you can see here I had to futz around with 2 different clamps, get the jig in place, get all the spacers right. And again, it worked, it just wasn't superb. So this is what I came up with instead, which is pretty much just combining all of the spacers I was using into a single piece. One of them slots into an existing dado, more cleanly than that, hopefully. And then I just had to put a single clamp on it. Probably didn't even need the clamp, but it just helped. And then I could just run the router right along that. You see when I'm routing these, I went most of the way in from one side and then took the router out of the cut and then went back in the other way. And that is just one trick to help prevent tear out as you're kind of blowing out of the end of the dado there. The wood has a tendency to split a lot, but if you come in from the other side and just do a little climb cut, it works. My poor little router bit was really going through it. You can see the burn marks here. They won't be visible in the end, so I wasn't too fussed about it, but that router bit's about retired now. So, unsurprisingly, the second jig I made worked a lot better and a lot more reliably. The first method was okay, but I did find the board closer to me is the first one I did, and there were just a couple. This space right here is just maybe a millimeter shy of what it should be. And this one's a little bit long, and so those little discrepancies can stack up when you're doing sequential dados like this. I think I'll probably be able to salvage this, because again, it's pretty darn close. I might just have to tweak a couple dados and they'll be a little bit gappier than they normally might be, but I think that's fine. But the good news is, this guy works very well. The only tricky part is getting the first dado aligned right, which I've just been measuring from the bottom. And that worked out okay. So hopefully that continues to work, because I got 6 more of these to do. Incremental improvement as we go. Here I am using the new jig to do a full set. I would just use a speed square clamp to the piece to establish that first dado on the top shelf, and then could just run down the piece. It went from taking me about half an hour per one of these vertical pieces to cut all the dados to 7 or 8 minutes. So the jig was well worth my time. It saved me several hours in terms of work, and not to mention just the lack of frustration and stuff that went along with that. So whenever you have a chance to make a little jig for something, if it only takes you half an hour to figure it out, just do it. It's so worth it. You can see at the end there I used a little tapered piece of plywood just to cut that tapered bottom. The reason for that tapered bottom piece is to make it easier for limited mobility folks or people who are just uncomfortable bending over to see the spines of either books or DVDs that are on the bottom shelf. You can see me here drilling and countersinking all of the holes for the screws that are going to hold the shelves in place once they're assembled. I just wanted to screw these together and not glue them so they'd be easy to take apart. Here I am rounding over the corners of some cross pieces that I'm going to glue to the backs of a couple of the shelves on each bookshelf, and this will be the piece that gets screwed into the wall when they're installed. And then I just glued and put a couple 1.25" screws that I had lying around into each of these, made a nice robust thing. I used every clamp I had to get them all glued up at once. I truly think every clamp I had was occupied at some point during this project. And here I am drilling and screwing for the screws that are holding these in. I didn't space them out especially carefully because no one will ever see them, but I put 4 in each, roughly 1 a foot. And then sanding. My friend Gary, fellow board member of the library here, came and very kindly offered many hours of his Saturday to come help me just grind away at sanding these. I think we took them up to 180 grit. It took a while. Both of us were really just cooking all day. Not pictured, our fellow board member Nancy, who's another friend of mine, came and did a huge bulk of the polyurethaning. I chipped in here and there. But she really did the vast majority of it. Put essentially 2 coats of polyurethane on any of the visible or exposed surfaces and just 1 coat on the bottoms of shelves or the backs of the verticals that aren't never going to get seen. Yeah, this was by far the most time-consuming part of the entire process, just because between everything there was north of 50 individual pieces that had to be finished, and every horizontal space in my shop was taken up by that. Hey, it's Jeff from the future, now with a little more hair. I wanted to jump into this video and just say, support your local libraries! Support the libraries everywhere! Libraries are fantastic! They're one of the few places in the world, especially in the United States, where you can be somewhere and not be advertised to or charged for something. They have all sorts of great amenities, not just books anymore, not just DVDs. Ours has a 3D printer, they have a bunch of tools you can rent, they have e-bikes you can rent, and I say rent, borrow, no charge, and it's just a fantastic community service that really makes the most of every single dollar that they get. Very easy way to support your local library without having to pretty much do anything is just go get a library card. A lot of times they're not even physical cards anymore. They'll just sign you up for an account. And that helps them determine how much government funding they get and how much resources they can get, which is fantastic. And again, costs nothing and is very straightforward. Of course, you can usually donate to your local library or offer to volunteer if they're looking for that. Some are, some aren't. Point is, libraries are a fantastic institution. They're one of my favorite things in this country, in this world, really. And you should all support them. It's great. Anyway, now I'm going to assemble some shelves. And here you can see Gary and I assembling. This would have been, I believe, the 3rd shelf that we put together. I tried to do one by myself, and I got it together, but it was just awkward and ungainly. So Gary came and pitched in to help me do this. Of course, this one was by far the toughest to get together. The dados were just a little tighter. I think it was because the polyurethane was a little bit thicker on these.
Should have filmed a different one. The rest of them were easier than this.
Exactly so. But with a little clamping, a little gentle whacking with a mallet, we got everything where it needed to go. And once you got a couple shelves on, the job got a lot easier, because the whole thing was a little bit more self-supporting. The vertical side you can see on this one ended up being the side that was visible in the library, because we really liked that little bark inclusion that you see there. And there they are all assembled. They conveniently fit on the back of a truck, which worked out nicely. Didn't mean for that to happen, but it worked out. And here they are in their new home. Thanks very much for watching. More to come.